Hey, what's going on, guys? We got a special guest here. We have Rob Levin. He's the founder of CIS Ventures LLC. Rob, we're excited to have you on the hashtag Clockedin podcast. Why is investing important?
Wow, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Why is investing important? Well, I mean, take that in a couple of from a couple of different perspectives. I mean, if you're a business, it's important so that you continue to grow and innovate and have resources and can achieve whatever mission it is that you've set out to do with the company. And I think that the same holds true, in your personal life. It's like, how do you take the resources that you've accumulated and turn them into more resources, so that you have like I think my view is the money is it's a scorecard, but it's the thing that gives you optionality. It's the thing that allows you to do the things that you want to do in life. And so I think investing is just a key component of that. You only have so much time that you can trade for money. So you're going to hit that ceiling at a certain point. And investing kind of, closes the gap between that and, all of the other goals that you have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I find a lot of people focus so much on like, how much am I making this year? What's my income? What's the this? The back end of it is completely forgotten about. It is
Yeah.
completely forgotten about, and people are not paying attention to that. And that's really your side hustle or your other way of making money. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best businesses are the ones that, continue to make money while you're asleep, right? So it's the ones that continue to, to throw off additional returns when you're not doing anything. And, that's a great place to be.
Absolutely, because it helps so many people and it really does bring it all together. And for you, so what do you think is for you? You've had a lot of success in your career. You've done a lot of incredible things. What do you think is the best way to get everybody aligned on the real vision and the values? Because I feel like a misalignment can be devastating to a business, career, family unit. It can be really challenging for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question to unpack. I think you really have to sort of boil it down to, first principles and really understand human behavior a little bit. If you really look into, what motivates people and why people do the things they do, and I've had the luck, the pleasure, the good fortune to have lived in the U.S., but also lived in Hong Kong and London, and have traveled in I don't know how many countries at this point. And one of the things you realize after having that kind of experience is doesn't matter if you're in Dubai, Paris, London, New York, Miami, Singapore, Hong Kong. At the core of it, people are wired the same, right? I mean, it really is interesting. If you sit in a bar in Dubai at 8 o'clock next to some other business person from France, they're worried about the same things you are. They have the same aspirations that you do at their core. They may have a different language, they may have different experiences, but at the core of it, we are all wired to do what's in our own best interest first and foremost. And I think that that's something that not enough people understand, and it doesn't make people bad. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. But we are wired to survive and procreate, and and that's really at the core of everything that we do. And everybody talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and getting to that self-actualization. And but you really have to look down that pyramid at the foundation, and it really is, it's survival, and you have to do you know those things that are going to keep you alive first and foremost. And given that we're all wired that way, you really have to make sure that you understand that core principle whenever it doesn't matter if it's a family unit, a business, a nonprofit, whatever, an individual project. People will always do what's in their best interest. And once you understand that, then you can sort of take a step back and say, okay, here's where we're going, or here's what we want to achieve. How do I incentivize the people that I need to get on board to align around that? And I know that we had talked before about the 2008 financial crisis and what happened there, and how could so many people have been wrong, and all these people did all these bad things. But I had a finance business in 2008 when the world crashed that didn't survive that time period. We didn't come out on the other side. And after that, I spent a lot of time looking at, behavioral economics and psychology and all this other stuff to say, like, what happened here? Like how could so many quote unquote smart, educated people get this wrong or miss it? And it was eye opening to see that everybody in the system was doing exactly what they were incentivized to do. There was not
Yes.
anybody in there that was operating against their best interest. The problem was those interests weren't aligned, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about what happened in 08 and then followed into 09, this was if we just take the mortgage business as an example, investors wanted yield. So investment banks and the financial geniuses created structures that had yield, but they wanted yield with low risk. So they went to the rating agencies and they said, hey, we want this yield, but we need to find a way to make it, investment grade or low risk. And they did what they were supposed to do. And then you just go down the line, the mortgage bankers, the brokers, and even the people taking out the mortgages, all along the line, everybody was acting in their own best interest. But when you pull back from that and look across it, those interests were not aligned. So that's when that's a pretty gross example of how this goes wrong. It really upsets the world economy. But you can see that in everything that you do, whether it's in your company, or in your family, or even in a project with your friends. That I think is something that people just don't appreciate and don't spend enough time on and don't think about enough. So if anything, you really have to think about how do you align everybody around the same thing. And I think the second part of it is, and then you've got to communicate that to everyone, right? People can't read your mind. People don't know what you're thinking. People don't, just because and you think you're being clear. My old business partner used to say communication is message delivered, message received. And just because you delivered a message doesn't mean it was received. And you need to make sure you've got both of those covered. And I think if people would just, they seem simple, but they're not easy, right? They're not. It's pretty basic stuff, but everybody just goes past that or ignores it, and then they wonder, like, I don't understand why people aren't doing what I want them to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. I 100% agree. And that's why with Edwards Consulting, we have five pillars. We have mental health, physical health, community service, philanthropy, spirituality, and relationships. And we always go through with all clients is figuring out where people are at today and where do they want to be. So, Rob, for you, mental health wise, just
Mm.
today, like it's
Mhm.
March 7th at 10 a.m. What do you think your mental health on a 1 to 10 is? Like, where would you be?
With 10 being,
The
everything's
best.
perfect, the,
Yeah.
world's at peace, everybody's happy, and one being, total, total disaster and, ready to go jump in bed and suck my thumb for the day. I would think, I think today, probably a 6 or a 7. It's not perfect, but, things feel pretty good. And, I'm in a pretty good place, good relationship, pretty secure, pretty happy. So I would say, let's say it's a 7.
Absolutely. And then what would a 10 look like for you?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm sitting here thinking, like, is there a 10? Like, is there a time where everything, because
Well,
across your pillars, right? You have 5. We're talking about, I sort of look at 3. It would mean all of those are quote in the green, right? All of them are going well at the same time. Everything's happy, and the 3 for me are financial, family and relationship. So, like, it's really interesting, and I would guess I would put this back to you. It's like, when in your life are all three of those just perfectly aligned? Your family's happy, your financial situation's good, your relationships are, going great, all at the same time, all at the same level. That's a pretty rare instance, I would think, for most people. You're always having, relationship might be great, but maybe you're struggling on your business side a little bit, right now, and
Yeah.
you got to bring that back up.
Of course. I mean, the reason I asked the question of what a 10 looks like is because all of us have different definitions of what a 10 could be, right? So sometimes mental health wise, a 10, some people who are very happy and content, it would be, hey, I woke up today. Like
Mm,
everyone's got a different perspective on what this might be. And that's what
sure.
opens up a lot of the optionality for us. You know what I mean? So we all
Hmm.
sit here and we think about there's so many challenges in the world, but it's like, what is our definition? And the reason I ask people to define a 10 is
Mm,
just because once we have it defined, then we know what it is. So that once we achieve it, it's not that, oh, that was a 10 on this day, but now it's not a 10 anymore. Because it's
yeah.
important. It's really
Yeah.
important. So
Yeah.
physical health wise, what do you think you're at on a 1 to 10?
Yeah, I think that's one where I would say I'm closer to an 8 or 9. I think it's really important for me. I pay attention to it a lot. I didn't used to, and I learned the hard way that if you don't feel good physically, it just impacts everything that you do. So I spend a lot of time just thinking about my physical well being, moving, eating, sleeping, those kind of
What
things.
and what's the regimen? Because there might be
Hmm.
people listening right now who are like, I'm at a 1. Like,
Yeah.
Rob, it's great that you're at an 8 or 9, but like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
How do you get to that?
Yeah. So, a business that we had founded, me and two partners, was called the Center for Health and Human Performance. And, it sounds like a very aspirational thing. We're trying to maximize human performance. And it was really interesting. Our chief medical officer, who really put the clinical side of the program together for us, we were expecting him to come up with all these crazy, supplements and, therapies and stuff. And we would go in there and talk to him, and he's just like, look, how do you sleep? How do you eat? How do you move? If you don't fix those three things, anything that I do is just going to be putting a band-aid on it, or just, exacerbating whatever is underlying. So to me, it's really, am I eating the right things? And I stick to a pretty clean diet. I don't know that I would categorize it as, keto or paleo or anything like that. It's just, eat clean food. I want my food to be an ingredient, not have ingredients. So, just keep it simple, prioritize sleep, try and get, 7, 8 hours a night. There's very, very, very few of us who can really perform on less. And then just do some physical activity, it doesn't have to be every day, but, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, whether that's just taking the dog for a walk. I happen to, be a little bit more of a maniac. So I do a lot of, mixed martial arts and weightlifting. I mean, that's my outlet for
What kind of
that.
martial
But
arts did you get into?
so I've done MMA, boxing, kickboxing, and jujitsu. So I've just, to me, that it's just a great outlet, and I love it. And you'll find people in that world, they either absolutely love it or they don't do it. There's very little middle ground in in that sport and that kind of training. And then I just do some weight training, a couple of days a week outside of that. But to me, like, those are the fundamental things. And again, it's not right for everyone, but just do something, right? Clean up your
Yeah,
diet, eat good food, good healthy food, get the right amount of sleep, and just move. Like I said, you
yeah,
could just take a walk every day. That's fine. Just get out and move around. And it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
absolutely. Yeah, it's creating systems that
Hmm.
really help. Like for me, I started joining, there was a Muay Thai gym that's at 6 a.m. on Tuesday and Thursday because I was trying to do morning workouts too. So
Hmm.
I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday was lifting, Tuesday, Thursday is Muay Thai. And I started getting into it. And I think the reason people like it so much is one, it's a self-defense. So you start to get to learn about your body. And then you learn about your body in space. So you're learning something while training the body to do this new activity, which becomes a very fun environment. And I think I'd encourage everyone to go try something out or try to get into a system that could help that. And then
Sure.
for you, the next pillar is community service philanthropy. So it's basically helping people. On a 1 to 10, like where do you think you're at in that?
Yeah, right now, that I probably it's probably fallen off a bit, just because of some other priorities, but it's always an important thing. I'd probably say now it's a 4 or 5. In the past, it's been higher. I've been on nonprofit boards, and I've done a lot of service work.
And what what
Mhm,
made you go on those nonprofit boards? What made you think about that? Because I know our days can be so inundated with I'm business, I have my family,
mhm.
I have this. So to give time to other people is such a what are you talking about, Rob?
Yeah.
What are you saying?
So one is, and I think this, it sounds a little bit cliche, but it was, do I believe in the mission of this organization? Do I think I can help
Yes.
it, and achieve that? So first and foremost, it was, I've been on 2 nonprofit boards in the last 6 years, and in both cases, we love the mission and the people and what they were trying to do. In both cases, they were fairly unique, in terms of how they were helping the community. One was an organization that's it's growing, pretty rapidly now, but that provides like high level consulting and strategy services to nonprofits, right?
Oh
And
wow.
it's a way, when I first, the reason I got connected to them was prior to that, the extent of my helping organizations was writing checks, and that's fine. And they, all organizations, need money. But it seemed to me like a cop out, right? It's like, here's some money, go away. Sure, I'm helping, and I feel good, but what's more valuable than money is time. And so this whole organization is built around that, where they take, lawyers, consultants, people from Deloitte, from Boston Consulting, from the investment world, from all kinds of, from technology, and they put them together in teams, and they say, okay, you're a small nonprofit. You're never going to be able to afford to hire BCG to come in and do a project for you.
Sure. Yeah.
But, we will make those people available to you for X amount of time to help you with Y problem.
Wow.
And the nonprofits got more out. I mean, they would tell us, they got more out of that than, they couldn't put a dollar value on what it was, right? Because you're really helping them to grow the organization, build for the future, be sustainable. And, to me, that was just, it was like, what a great thing to offer to, these small nonprofits. And when I say small, we're talking about, nonprofits that were still hundreds of millions of dollars big, but their budgets are
A lot
pretty
of the
allocated.
Yeah, a lot of the time the nonprofit does not have the business centricness, and
Oh no.
they don't they're not going to be able to bring in these high level people. So I think that's a beautiful activity, and you find that like when you're in the system, when you're helping out, and when you're contributing, you get a lot from it, they get a lot from it. It's a win-win for everyone, which I think is
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It was incredibly gratifying to do that. I mean, it was, okay, I'm doing more work after work for no money, but they were just so grateful for what we were able to do for them. And so identifying with the mission has got to be, number one. And to me, it was like, okay, how can I contribute, more than just, writing a check and going about my way.
And I think the dividend is realizing it helps your perspective. When you're able to help people that are in need, like any of us can do this. We
Sure.
all have homelessness is massive across the United States. All you have to do is go to the food store, spend 20 bucks, go bring the person a meal, and they'd be incredibly indebted to you. And people don't realize that everybody can be helping right now. So I think that's awesome that you shared that
Absolutely.
through that way. Now, the next one,
Absolutely.
which I know you're probably pretty high on, is relationships because I
Hmm.
know it's one of your pillars, so it overlaps. So
Yeah.
you think about relationships on a 1 to 10.
Um, I think, I do focus on that as kind of, and this is one of those things that you just kind of learn over time. And it's one of those where you have to realize that it's not good to fix it. But I would say, right now that's pretty high on my list. It's probably a 7 or 8 in terms of, because I really know the value of relationships. And, I don't know what the demographic of your audience is, but if they're in the younger side or even sort of in, in the early part of their career, it's the single most important thing in, in your life, right? Businesses are people coming together for a common goal, right? I mean, that is
Yes.
what it is. And so the key there is the people, right? Businesses are not these amorphous things that just kind of, wander around the planet. It's people. And I'll never forget. I'll just a quick aside that when I first started in the private equity investing, M&A world, I was working for a firm, and we had a lawyer who was a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant deal lawyer. But he was miserable all the time. It was just a running joke in the office. He was just miserable. And one day, he was sitting at his desk, and, he had paper everywhere, and he was, muttering something to himself. And I was like, his name was Len. I'm like, Len, what is going on? Like, what's wrong? And he said, this business would be great if it weren't for all the fucking people. And I was like, that is the business. I'm like, that is it. Like, the business is not a spreadsheet and a bunch of legal documents. It's the people.
Yeah.
And that is like, that's not the first and won't be the last time I've heard that kind of sentiment. And so it just goes to the core of, like, you just need to have good, open, honest, relationships with people. You're not going to get along with everyone. Everyone's not going to be your best friend. But you as long as you're true to yourself, you're honest, you communicate with people, you'll find, that most everybody will be, if not receptive to it, at least respect the fact that you do it. And I think that that's really what it boils down to. And, as you progress through your career, you will realize how important the people you meet and the connections that you make are beyond anything else. So I think, that's something I've spent a lot of energy to try and work on. And so right now, that's pretty high for me.
Absolutely. And I think it comes down to also maintaining those relationships because
Mm.
we don't realize how many of our relationships, everyone from high school to college to early jobs to late jobs to wherever we meet them. So, one of the easy ways I do this, and I just share this because it's an easy way, around Christmas time, like between Christmas and New Year's, most people aren't doing anything. So, I literally go through my phone and I send voice notes to everyone. Like, it would be like, hey, Rob, like, hope you're doing well. Hope CIS is doing amazing. And I hope you're having an incredible year. And I literally do that for everyone that I think there might be a connection for because I sit there and I go, it's 7 seconds. Like
Hmm.
person worth 7 seconds. And you sit there, whoa, it's a lot of people. There's 2,000 people. But it's like, why would you not do the little thing to maintain the relationship? Because a lot of the time it's just reach out to someone and they'll reach back out to you. Like you have to lead with how you want to go about it because I think that's such an important thing. And especially
Yes.
you know it too, that the bigger you get and the more people in your life, the better your experience is. Like, yes, you're going to have
Mhm.
more deaths. Yes, you're going to have more cancers. Yes, there's going to be more negative things that occur, but you can be there for your friends and family and like everyone you work with, clients, etc. I think it's so important and it's missed a lot of the time. The last
Yeah.
one is spirituality. I don't know,
Mm.
people omit this, some people connect with it. Is there anything for you?
Um, that's a really interesting part of my life right now, because um I grew up in a middle class Jewish household in New Jersey. We weren't particularly religious, but it was around, and we got bar mitzvah and did all that stuff. And I just personally kind of grew out of that, got a little bit disillusioned with it, and kind of you just I wouldn't say I became a hardcore atheist, but I kind of just didn't religion didn't click with me. And for about 10 or 15 years there, I would say could even tell you what spirituality meant or what any of that was. And it wasn't until about 6 or 7 years ago that I kind of felt like there was something missing, right? There was like there's this hole somewhere, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I think I landed on, and I like your word here, spirituality, is because it's, it doesn't mean that you believe in some, particular God or not or whatever. I think it's just being like realizing like that that we are all connected in the universe.
Yes.
Like there is this, fabric to it. And you start realizing that just try it, not just you, but the people listening, just try it. Like if you leave the house and you're miserable and you have negative energy and you're just down on everything, guess what? The world's going to look like that. And you're putting that out, and and people will respond to it. And if you walk out and you're happy and you say hi to people, or even if you're just calm and and just sort of satisfied, people react differently to that. And you don't even have to say anything, right? I mean, if you walk down the street or you walk into a coffee shop and somebody's miserable, they don't even have to say anything to you. You just pick it up, you feel it. And to me, like that's spirituality. It's like, how do you, connect with the rest of the world and the universe, however you want to, say it, is that. So for me, like it's certainly not, as high as some of the other areas, but it's higher now than it's ever been. If I said it, if I say it's a 4 or 5, like that is not, you may say, well, that's really low, but that's,
Well,
that's from a
Rob,
base of 0.
Rob, for the thing for you though is everyone has their own rating, right? So we
Mm,
don't have to do this rate. So if your rating is, hey, my spirituality is a 10, if every time I go on and talk to someone, I'm excited and happy to be, not saying you're happy, but like you're at least eluding an aura of, hey, everything's gonna be all right. We're gonna live, we're gonna be all right, and we're gonna get there. Because we can control whatever our tens are. And I think that's the most important thing that everyone defines success as like, how the world views it. Oh, you have to go to church 8 times a week, or you have to go to synagogue 10 times a week, or whatever it is. You don't have to do any of that. You have to do whatever's right for you. And I
yeah.
think that's so awesome. And I appreciate your authentic ability around there because you have traveled a lot. You've had a lot of experiences. You met a lot of people. So do you think travel's had a big impact in that for you? Because I know traveling broadens the horizons, it brings the perspective together. Like how has that helped you with like just everything we've been discussing?
Hmm. Yeah, like I can't agree with you more. Like getting out of your comfort zone or your hometown or that, that small world that you grow up in, for most people, is eye-opening. I mean, it makes you really appreciate. I mean, first of all, it gives you firsthand real experience about
Yes.
other people and other places. And it's not some boogeyman, it's not some strange world, it's not something you make up in your head. You go there and you see, you see the people, you see how they live, you see what they eat and how they work and what their values are, and you connect with them, and you're like, oh, well, just because this person speaks Mandarin and lives in Beijing, like they're still good people, they're still happy, they're still doing like a lot of the same things. They're not this, this crazy, two-horn thing with a tail running around like it, you build up all these these ideas in your head. So getting out, it gives you that direct exposure, and it allows you to sort of see that, and it also allows you to sort of appreciate that, you know I don't know how much travel you've done in different parts of the world, but we here in America, we think something that's from the 1600s is old, right? And I have a
Sure.
friend who lives in northern England, just on the border of Wales, and he lives in his family estate, which was built in the 1200s. I mean, that's his house, right? And that's not even the oldest thing around there. And then you go to other parts of the world and you realize, like, you know, the world didn't start the day I was born. Right? There was, right, and you really get that, and you see these amazing things that people were doing in the in 16 BC and building, like, and you realize, like, wow, like, we're pretty much just like them. Sure, maybe we've got 50-inch flat screen TVs now, but what was the equivalent of a 50-inch TV back in the 600s, right? I mean, they were still, able to do a whole lot of really amazing things. They didn't have the internet, they didn't have AI, they didn't have TV and podcasts and all this other stuff. But, that's the foundation we all build off of today. Like without that, there's no this.
A
So I
hundred.
think it just gives you that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've traveled a good amount, and what I realized is Like I ended up, it all started when I studied abroad in Rome, Italy during college, and then afterwards we've been going international once a year. And then last year we actually did 7 weeks in Europe, me and my wife, and we just bounced around and we were working remote. And the thing that no one realizes is that back in the day, like a lot of these people never moved. And then
Hmm.
you start looking like the 1900s, everyone like 17, 1800s, everyone's farmers, you got the militia, you got the military. Then you start moving to the 1900s, everyone's in the Industrial Revolution. We're all just kind of working in our area. Then the airplane becomes invented, and you're like, oh, like we can fly. And it wasn't affordable back then. Now it's becoming more and more affordable. So the times are just completely changing to where this, like, the world's kind of small. Like, for $1,000, you can
Very
literally
small.
fly anywhere in the world,
Yep.
and that's pretty cool. Like I know that might be a lot for some people, and it is what it is, but if you prioritize it, you can experience incredible things and start to see the world in a completely different way. So for
You
you, Rob,
also,
yeah,
one more thing I would say on that, and
yeah,
I
of
think
course,
you're
yeah,
100% right. But the other thing that it does is it also shows you like there's another way, right? We all
yeah,
think like the American way or the European is the way and it's the right way and the only way. And then, you go to, I just remember, I spent, I had taken a job and well, taking a job. We started our company and I was in London. And so on the weekends, like talk about it, you could for $19, you can get a Ryanair flight and go to Portugal or Spain or Italy. I mean,
yeah,
it's amazing. And that's what you would do on the weekend, right? It's an hour and 20-minute flight to Barcelona. So you would fly down there and you would realize like they take a nap in the afternoon and their pace is much slower and they eat late, but it's very communal and like everybody's out in the in the plazas or the piazzas or the squares and they're having a glass of wine and they're talking and they're not like it's amazing to see even today, and this is not like we're talking about 100 years ago. You go there, they're not on their phones, they're not looking down, and they're talking to each other, and there's no if you but go back to the friend of mine who lives in northern England. Every single Friday, and this is a very, very small place, right? I mean, this is a
yeah,
town, it's called Shropshire. It's, I don't know, a few hundred people, and there's one local pub. And every Friday, pretty much the whole town goes to that pub somewhere between 5 and 7 p.m. And I remember going there the first time, and a couple things that were just like, to me as an American, you're in a pub, so it's a bar. Um, there's no ESPN on TV. There's no TV there. You're not there to watch TV and be distracted. The other thing that was interesting is you don't tip. Like they're not like I remember the faux pas. I got a round of beers and I left 5 pounds on the bar and the guy was just like, "What's this? Like you forgot your money?" And I'm like, "Well, no, that's for you." And he was looking at me like almost insulted about it. And they're like, "Look, he makes his money selling you the beer. Don't worry, like that's we don't do that over here." So you do get a different perspective, and then you can figure out like, oh, maybe I can incorporate some of that. Maybe I don't have to work 24/7 and be on my phone all the time, and I can take a break. And I look around and like, yeah, maybe the people aren't making millions of dollars a year at even aspire, and a lot of them don't even aspire to that. They're like, we're fine. Like this is good.
yeah.
This is what life is all about.
Yeah, and it's a completely different viewpoint, and it makes you think really differently. Like the biggest one for me was we did a trip, 2021. Me and three buddies, we went to the Inca Trail, and we hiked for
Mm,
4 days, and then we were in Peru, and then we went to this place called Iquitos. I remember going out there and I was paying for all five of us, and we went different bars, we went all food, a full meal, everything, and it was like $200 for five of us, which is just bizarre. Like you
yeah,
can go out now and have spent $200 by yourself, and
yeah,
it was a crazy concept because you start to realize, like, hey, maybe I'm on the wrong train, and that
yeah.
train I'm thinking is like with America, where it's also like you're constantly a hamster on the wheel, no matter who you are, because you're like that guy's got this car. Does his car go the same place? Yes.
Hmm.
Does it drive faster? I mean, yeah, but there's still a speed limit. But it's still like, it's like, I want the car, but the car is literally the same. Like, you start to realize that it's all the same stuff. And it's like, how do you really get to enjoy your life to the fullest? Because we have so much more optionality now. Now,
Yeah.
one of the big things with you, Rob, is that you are big into investing. How can
Mm.
people even get started with this? Because I have a lot of friends, a lot of family, a lot of people I know that say, I'm making my money. I don't need to do the investing thing. Like My 401k will take care of me. Like, is that enough? Like, or people should be doing more, or how should they think about this? Because as you know, there's a ton of like, oh, I want to be a trader, I want to be a drop shipper, I want to be a this, I want to be a that. And
Mm.
it's like, how should people really think about this to build a real financial moat around what they're trying to do?
Yeah, so to be clear, so I started my career as an equity analyst, right? So analyzing companies for, we were a buy side equity analyst. So should you buy this company at what price value? Like, and it's very academic and pretty, model driven. But the part of it that always uh, you know, that I felt I was missing was just like, okay, this is great, but you didn't have any connection to like the business itself. Like, what are they actually doing, at the end of the day on the customer side of things or internally or where they're going. So I slowly transitioned out of that, in my business career to running businesses. And then, the investing that I do is in companies, right? So to me, that's a great way to do two things. One is, yes, you can make money, betting on the right, when I say betting, investing in the right teams and the right companies in the right space. But it also gives you a sense of like you're helping somebody else to achieve what it is that they're, passionate about. And so there's
Can
sort
you
of
explain
a
that a little bit further? Can you explain that? Because I know to you it might be super easy, like give someone money and it helps them with their path. What does that even mean? Like,
Yeah. So I mean, like, business, you have an idea, you have a problem that you want to solve. You think you've got this unique way of doing it, or, some, new thing that it generally starts with a problem that you're having or something that you're seeing. And then you want to, be able to turn that into a business. Well, you need certain things to do that. You need resources. And one of those is financial resources. You need money at
yes.
some point. You need to be able to generate it. And you can do that by bootstrapping it by just going out and trying to hustle and sell stuff and try and get in enough revenue to cover the bills and then eventually make some money. That's certainly nothing wrong with that. It's what I did with my first business. But getting outside capital, getting outside investment, can help accelerate that. It can help you to go faster, build more, hire more and better people, to get you there in a shorter amount of time or with a better ultimate product or solution. And the money that we put into companies, that's what it's for, right? It's really about, you know is this a good team? Is this a good idea? And do I think that there's a high probability of success? And what we're there to do is enable that success, right? That's the way we have to think about it. And so the payoff at the end is twofold. It's one, it's financial, and if they do well, then great. You're gonna get a nice return on your investment. And two, it's seeing Jordan to actually build a business and hire people and put something out into the world and make a difference. And then maybe Jordan goes on and takes some of that money and invests in the next group of Jordans that are out there and takes a little bit of it and does some philanthropy or sets up a foundation. And so but it all starts with that sort of that initial amount of capital to sort of help get the flywheel started or help to ignite that business. And so that's obviously like I'm not going to share anything that you probably haven't heard a million times about fundamentals and looking at the business. Like that's pretty, you can learn that anywhere, right? But it's sort of like, how do you take that and translate it into something that's bigger than that? And that's why I say it's the two payoffs are both financial as well as experiential or giving back in some way.
Absolutely. And when you really think about that, like Rob was giving an example of like a small, I mean, I was hearing it was like a startup, like someone starting up a business doing that. That same principle applies to the stock market as
Sure.
well. So when you
100%.
think about it, like if you have an Apple phone and you want to go to Apple and you want to be able to support Apple so that they have all their employees, you could buy a share of Apple and that could make a difference there. Because all you're doing here is really putting it all back together. Like you are reinvesting and you're supporting these other businesses that you think are operating well. And I think that's a brilliant thing. And now the other part of it was we talked about how there's so many get rich quick things online. Should people be signing up for courses, or how should they think about this?
Yeah, like I'm not saying that nobody should ever take a course in anything. I mean, you've got to study the markets that you're in, study your, you've got to know the basics, and I'm a huge fan of lifelong learning and constantly opening up to new things. But I think where people get a little bit off track there is, you know, I have a very big philosophy around fads and trends, right? And fads are exactly that. They're here today, they're gone tomorrow. They're the hot thing at the moment, and you never really want to be investing in or jumping on fads, because they always they go away and the next fad comes around. But trends, those are long term, sustainable things that have a real staying power, and so you really
What might be a trend? Yeah, what might be a trend that people?
so a trend would be aging, right? Like demographics, right? So you just look at a population, and you've got more people retiring than coming into the workforce. That's a trend, right? So
Okay.
that's not stopping anytime soon. And so how do you kind of think about that? What are the impacts of that long term? Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, especially here in the West, inequality is a trend, right? It has been growing, significantly, and that's a tough one to slow down. So when you've got a world of where that inequality is continuing to get bigger and bigger and bigger, what does that mean to the greater economy, the greater society? Like, these are trends versus a fad. And these they come and go. I don't want to get I don't know how acronymy you want to get on the podcast, but a few years back, right around the time about 2018, 19, 20, there was this, the world was, enamored with these things called SPACs, right? These special purpose
Yeah.
acquisition vehicles, right? So, and I remember, as an investor, seeing all these, folks coming to us and saying, invest in our SPAC, put money in our SPAC. And SPACs have been around since the 70s. Like, this is not a new thing, right? And they serve a very specific purpose for a very specific need. And in a good year, and I've talked to a lot of the banks that specialize in this, you would have a dozen, maybe 15 SPAC transactions that would, be out there. And in 2020, the beginning of 2020, there were over 900 of these, right, in a single year.
Yeah.
So we knew that that wasn't going to end well, but everybody was hearing about them on this podcast or on our Instagram feed or whatever. And they were just like, I got to get in on this. And I think the biggest, so I think the two things are: one, stay away from FOMO. If the only reason you're doing it is because everyone else is doing it and you're afraid you're going to miss it, not a good reason to do it in anything.
Yeah.
You really got to think about, like, what is going on here, and is this sustainable, and does it make sense for me, and whatever. And that's the same thing in business strategy or whatever. It's like, you don't get ahead of others by copying what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
That you're just going to be the same as them. So don't just because you hear about, like you said, I could teach you how to be a trader in 5 minutes a day. No, you can't. Like, that's just if it sounds too good to be true, or it's unbelievable. And then the same thing is like, the old saying, like, if you don't know who the sucker is at the table, it's you. Um, if somebody's selling you a course that says you can make $10 million a year by taking my $300 course, really? Like, if you can make $10 million a year, why are you selling it to me for $300? Like, and people just don't ask that question. They get caught up in the marketing hype and the pitch, and the guy's standing in front of his Lamborghini and his boat and his girlfriend in a bikini, and and you're just enamored by that. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to get that, and it just doesn't, it never materialized. It's great for them because they just sold you a course. But you really have to sort of think about whatever kind of investment you're doing, and I don't care if it's Apple or a early stage startup or anything. It's like, you really have to think, like, why am I making this investment? And your time is an investment. A course is an investment. Why am I spending? What do I hope to get out of this? Where is this going to go? Does it align with my values and what I want to do, and all of these other things? And if you're just a little bit, I don't want to people to be out there being miserable, but I think if you're just a little bit more skeptical and you think about it, it's that pause before making a decision. And I've gotten very good at, like, I see it, even if I see something that's super interesting to me, I'll always put it down and come back to it 24 hours later. Is it still interesting 24 hours later? Or was I just caught up in the moment? And sometimes you have to go back to it a few times before that. And to me at this point, so I'm 54 now, I've sort of, I've had some good successes and I've had major failures as well. And you sort of get to a point where it's like, it's either hell yes or no, right? It's either I gotta
Yeah.
love this thing or I'm just not gonna do it. And you realize that for every, like in the investing world, like especially in the VC, even in the PE space, um, everybody thinks like I got to get this deal done because it's the last deal I'm ever going to see. And you very quickly learn there's always going to be another deal. So even if I miss this one, and look, I look back at some of the deals that we passed on
Oh,
that went on to be, incredible successes or rocket ships and say, boy, if I only, but you can't go back and change that. And it's, but guess what? There was another deal and another deal and another deal. And, so even if you think like, oh man, I missed investing in Apple at $8 a share, yeah, I mean, sure, but there's other stuff that is going to come down the pike, and maybe you'll think next time, and you use that experience to to help guide what you do in the future.
yeah, I think that made a really good point, and there was 2 points I really liked. One was that the values you have, you agree with the founder, or you agree with the company and you agree with the values they're carrying. The other thing I appreciated was you sharing about some failures, because I mean we all have failures and it's like how do we overcome that, and you kind of gave some of those tips. So I know
Mhm.
we're finishing up soon. How can people how do you see investments? Like how do you see the future, and where should people maybe look at, like maybe a trend that you're seeing or maybe something they can focus on to help them for the future?
Yeah, I think right now, you've got to kind of look at things in there, with all of the present day information around. You know, it's not to follow. I sound like a broken record here, but it's not to follow the latest fad and pour in after, and follow everybody into a space just because, it's being talked about a lot or hyped up a lot. And, people talk about AI today, and, I was around during the dot-com boom and bust. And, I know a lot of people say it, but I've seen this movie before. It feels exactly like that. It's very early. Everybody's talking about it. People are investing in it, but it's we're so young in the game that nobody really knows where this thing is going, and the rate of change. I think that's a big thing that people miss today, is the rate of change is accelerating so quickly, and that's very, very hard to kind of to put into your into your calculation of what should I invest in. Before, it took a long time for markets to shift and technology to get adopted and things to change, to fundamentally move. And today that's happening at such a fast pace
Yes.
that you really got to slow down a little bit and understand, like, where are we in this cycle of this industry, this market, whatever it is. Are we at the beginning? Are we at the middle? Are we at the end? And every one of those has different characteristics, right? And so once you figure that out, then I think you're in a much better position to say, okay, you know, I understand where we are. We're early on in the cycle, or we're in a bit more mature place in the cycle. Here's what I can expect. Here's what, here's where the risks are. And I'm willing to take those risks, in, knowing full well that they're there, versus, if I put money into Coca-Cola today, I'm not going to get the same return as if I put it into, OpenAI 2 years ago, but pretty good chance Coca-Cola isn't going to zero tomorrow. Right? I mean, it's not
Yeah.
going away. But early AI companies, they're here today, gone tomorrow all the time. So that's just one example of it. But I think if you're just asking more practically, I think things like infrastructure and industries. When I first started investing, there was a on the in the public market side, um, we had a group for the firm I was working at that did a lot of investing in like biotech and sort of the next generation of medications and therapies and therapeutics that were coming out. And it was a it was a bet. It was a gamble. It was a straight up gamble as to whether or not, this, drug was going to ever make it to market. And very few of them are blockbuster drugs in return. But what you realize is, but everybody who's developing these things needs microscopes and centrifuges and lab equipment and,
Oh,
the
I got
basics of the industry. So you can do the same thing with just about any industry. It's like, look, I don't know which AI tool, application RAG is going to win, but they all need compute power. They all need data centers. They all need, certain things to build on. And especially early on in a cycle, just find those things, find the microscopes that they're
you
buying.
in a gold
And,
rush.
and yeah, and start there. And that'll also give you a good idea, if you're smart about it, to say, oh, wait a minute, Pfizer's buying a lot of microscopes, man. What is going on over at Pfizer? And so it gives you an insight into what else might be happening in the market in a way that you're still in the market, you're still investing, you're still making money. But it gives you that window into, okay, now it's time to invest in Pfizer because they've got, this
Yeah.
thing that's
It,
happening.
in the gold rush, you wanted to sell shovels.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
no, I love that. I love that because it gives you a way to get exposure to something without being totally, I'm placing a bet on this specific thing operating and working to the best of
Right.
its ability. So I think that's completely awesome.
Right.
Rob, where can people learn more about you? Where can they learn more about your business?
Yeah, they can go to CISventures.net. The website is, it's a work in progress right now. We're cleaning it up. The new one should be launched in probably a couple of weeks here, but CISventures.net. They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not too big on the socials, but if you have any questions or want to reach out, those are the two best places to do it. And, happy to have a conversation with anybody around investing and strategy and business and VC, or if you just want to chat about something, give me a call.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.